All right, well, welcome everybody to our session this morning on designing volunteer positions. My name is Terry Straub. I'm an extension educator with the University of Minnesota Extension. I work with the Master Gardener Volunteer Program in Hennepin County, Minnesota, which is the Minneapolis area, for those of you familiar with Minnesota. And joining me today is Wendy. Wendy, I'll have you introduce yourself as well.
Good morning, everyone, and welcome. My name is Wendy Van Graberich, she, her, and I'm the training manager at the Minnesota Association for Volunteer Administration, MAVA.
Great. Well, I am going to share my screen then, and we will get started. We have some introductory screens here. I'm going to be using Mentimeter. For those of you who joined in the last session, you just go to menti.com and there'll be a little number here that'll tell you what code to put in when we start getting to the participatory stuff, but just know that that is coming. And again, that's menti.com. And with that, I'll start trying to share my,
Your screen looks great.
There we are. Okay, cool. All right. Cindy, I'll have you start with these beginning pieces here.
My favorite slide, my very favorite slide. Good morning, everybody. I think it's morning for all of you. My name's Cindy Christie. I'm with the Peer Recovery Center of Excellence, and I'm a woman in long-term recovery. I love seeing a lot of familiar faces and names on here. I know some of you have been to our trainings and webinars, and I'll let you know up front that the Peer Recovery Center of Excellence is going to have their first town hall meeting on April 16th, and I will send you the registration link. I know some of you have been to our meet and greet sessions, which are really informal, but if you want to get to know more about the work of the Peer Recovery Center, feel free to register and join us for the town hall again on April 16th. So, you know, this is a fairly new grant, and I'll just quickly go over our focus areas, which are there on the screen. Clinical integration of peer support services, the recovery community organization capacity building, which is what you are all a part of today with this learning collaborative, workforce development, and evidence-based practice, all pertaining to peer recovery support. And our partners are the University of Wisconsin-Madison. That's Chris Kelly, and I think all of you saw her last time you were on. She's awesome. We are partnered with University of Texas at Austin. They're taking care of the workforce development. And then evidence-based practice identification is the National Council for Behavioral Health. I think so. That's a little bit about us. We do take TA requests from anyone or any organization. There's a portal on our website, peerrecoverynow.org, that you can submit a request for technical assistance. Any one of you can, or your organization. Okay, let me, you want to go ahead and scoot the slides forward. This is a definition that I know Chris really likes. I think we all do. If we want addiction destigmatized, we need a language that's unified. The words we use matter. Caution needs to be taken, especially when the disorders concerned are heavily stigmatized as substance use disorders are. So we do use affirming languages on all of our trainings and events. We hope you will too. Next slide. Okay. And some of you, thank you for having your cameras on. They don't have to be on full time, but we love seeing your faces whenever you feel like turning it on. I think it makes it a more intimate meeting. Today's event is being recorded. These at the time are private recordings. We are posting these recordings on the landing page, which you all have access to. And I'll put that link back in the chat feature, but all the upcoming sessions, the handouts for today, our trainer, Terry Staub's bio is all at that landing page that you have. We will ask you when not speaking to keep your line muted. And we encourage the chat feature throughout the training. Feel free to ask questions, converse and respond to attendees throughout the training. And as Terry said, they use Mentimeter a lot. And I know that information would popped up on the screen. And next slide, please. Aha, speaking of Mentimeter, I guess I'm turning it over to you, Terry.
All right, well, surprise, there we are. So, all right, well, welcome everybody. And again, as mentioned, I'm Terry Straub, Extension Educator with the University of Minnesota Extension Master Gardener Volunteer Program in Hennepin County, Minnesota. You've got my bio information, but the short story of it is pretty much most of my career has been in volunteer leadership and engagement. And I've worked mostly in nonprofit organizations, but I've also, worked for the government, small nonprofit, large nonprofit, that kind of thing. And so I'll be pulling from my different experiences throughout today's training. I also want to thank you so much for the work that you do. It is so important, and having family members in recovery, I just really appreciate what you do, and thank you for engaging volunteers in the work that you do as well. So there you are. As you can see, we have a fun and exciting poll going on about, should you define everything a volunteer does for your organization? And what you need to do there is just go to menti.com and put in the code 6484114. You should be able to see that at the top of your screen. So it's menti.com and the code 6484114. And we'll let more people join in here for a second. This is just kind of your pop quiz for the day. As Cindy mentioned too, we do like to have this, try to do as much interaction as we can. So do feel free to use the chat feature, and Wendy will alert me when there are things coming up there so that I can concentrate a little bit more on what we're discussing today. But we'll have other times other than these different polls to allow you in. So with 22 participants and only 7 people responding, I'll still give you a little bit more time to go to that menti.com. Code is 6484114. We'll just see where we end up here. Hopefully it's not too much of a trick question. People are kind of split. Could be yes, could be no, could be maybe. 50-50 there with yes and no, or maybe and no. Give you just one more minute. Menti.com 6484114 to vote with 11 out of 23. Ooh, cool, 13. All right, well, I'm not going to share with you what the answer is right at this point in time. So I'm just getting a feel for the crowd. We'll see where we go here. We'll come back and discuss this towards the end of our session. We'll do a poll again at that time, and we'll see where we end up. But the majority here is saying maybe, and 1 firm yes and 5 firm no's, it looks like. So, all right, thank you for 50-50. All righty, so cool. We'll see what happens here with this when we come to the end of our session today. All right. So you've got learning objectives too that'll be shared. I'm not going to read the slide to you, but we'll be going through each one of these 4 objectives. The one thing I'll say today about designing position descriptions is that you would think we'd spend a lot of time about writing position descriptions, and we're really not going to spend too much time when it comes to the actual writing of it. But there's a lot that goes into it, a lot of prep time, a lot of things to maybe think through before we actually sit down and define what it is that volunteers do. So just know that in advance, that we're going to be spending some time thinking through what it is that volunteers are going to be doing, what is our organizational ready for volunteers, and what are the current trends going on in the field? What should we be aware of when it comes to attracting volunteers to the organization, and maybe writing positions that will attract people as well. So that's what we'll be doing for the next almost 2 hours here. So we'll start out, number 1, with the key concept of assessing your organizational readiness before bringing volunteers on board. Is your organization ready to start engaging people from the community? Is a huge question to ask. I think a lot of times with nonprofits, it's like, well, of course, we're a nonprofit, we should be engaging the community. And I think that is a good answer. But we might not have asked ourselves necessarily why, or are we ready? Is our organization ready? Our staff ready? Have we held various trainings for those volunteers and for those staff? We're going to be engaging volunteers, or we could be volunteer led too. And have we trained those volunteers to be able to work with other volunteers? So what I'm going to ask you to do is in the handouts that were provided, and I believe Christy had mentioned that they're on the landing page, is what I'd like you to do is to look for handout number 2. And it is an organizational readiness survey. And we'll have you, just give you about 5 minutes to complete that on your own. Take a look at it, and it's got some good questions there for you and for the organization. So it should take just a couple minutes here. And if you would, take a look at that, complete the questions. Again, it's handout number 2 in the handouts. And then if you, oh, go ahead.
Let me make sure. I only have one handout titled Designing Volunteer Position. Is it within?
It would be within that document.
Okay.
Yep.
So there is one
2.
handout. I'll put the link to that page again, and I can also upload it. So sorry for
Wonderful.
the interruption.
Oh
Okay.
yeah, no worries. Thank you for doing that. So yeah, so you just put there. We've got that in the link coming from Cindy. Thank you, Cindy. So take a look at that. Again, it's handout number 2. We'll just give you 5 minutes or so to take a look at that. Ask yourself those questions, and we'll go from there. So I am going to see if I can't get some music going here. Some background music, maybe or maybe not, if my iTunes is gonna play. And I'll just stop it for now. I'll just give you some time here to complete those questions. I'll give you about 5 minutes to do it. We'll pick her back up here about, let's do it at 10:16 or so. All right. Enjoy completing those questions there. If folks want to indicate when you're done with those questions by just in the reactions there, everyone's, it seems, are always a little bit different. But if you feel like, if you have a check mark you can put there, or raise your hand just to let me know that you're done. Like I said, we'll give you here till a couple more minutes, about 3 or so, but just indicate if you're done by putting a reaction there in the box. Thanks. We'll give you about one more minute or so here to finish up those questions, just about a minute. Okay, we'll continue on. Thank you for taking some time with that. So hopefully this wasn't too hard or disturbing for anybody. But there are some good questions to ask yourself. What do you know about volunteer motivation? Why are volunteers attracted to the organization? It's kind of like, what do you know about motivation? And there are parts of this training that will get into to more on motivation that can help assess that. Are the opportunities appealing and meaningful? Meaning, are you aware of what today's volunteers are looking for? We'll talk a little bit more about that. Are they? Have you thought through really what it is that people will do, and is it something that's going to motivate? It's also tied to that motivational piece. Are they going to want to do it for you and for your organization? Are you flexible? That kind of a thing. Other things, is the organization ready? Do you have a space for volunteers to work in? Or if there's not a space and they're working from home, how has that been communicated? Are there systems in place for communication? They know who to go to if there's an issue or some kind of problem, or just if they have questions. Are volunteers being rewarded, recognized, and engaged that way? And then lastly, that infrastructure piece, do we have orientation and training? Is there maybe a process in place in which to accept volunteers so that we know who our volunteers are? And then I'd mentioned this earlier, our staff trained. Do they know how to support and supervise volunteers? Have we thought that through? And lastly, is that structure and budget? Have we put resources towards the volunteer program? It doesn't necessarily have to be money, but as I mentioned earlier, just some space, or do we provide them with computers, or even if it's some kind of a reporting system, maybe an online system that supports our volunteers. So lots of things to think through from an organizational standpoint. And in some of these areas, we'll probably be more prepared than we are in others, but we'll want to get them all four kind of on the same basis, on the same page, more or less. And so there might be things that you want to work towards as an organization. I encourage you to talk about this with other staff people, maybe even engage your volunteers around these questions, just to see where you're at. What I'd like you to do here is to use the Menti again and just share, what did you learn about yourself or maybe the organization from that exercise? And again, it goes into, it's menti.com and 688411 to respond to that. So menti.com, the code is 688411. We'll see where folks are at. Okay, someone doesn't necessarily have some infrastructure, lost volunteers because of it. Got lots of work to do. Yes, and always. I've been with my program for 15 years, and it's like, oh, there's so much more to do. Need some structure. Oh, somebody's rocking mostly. That's good to hear. Got some in beginning stages, all the way from beginning to rock in. So maybe the two of you can connect. More organizing for volunteers. Volunteer program would benefit from having more structure. Okay. Hopefully these position descriptions will help with that then. Adjust and updating things. Maybe not ready. Need to work on building some structure, infrastructure for volunteers. Good to know. Develop some effective communication tools. Recognition. You'll have a whole session on that. Oh, very inclusive. Good to hear. Awesome. Cool. Wait for just a few more folks to contribute here. Got 11 out of 24. Again, that's menti.com, 6484 114 is the code. Pieces in place, but could use some polish and updates. Yeah, great.
Mine is saying waiting for the presenter to change the slide.
Oh, really? Huh. Any luck now?
No, it still says, please wait for the presenter to show the next slide.
Well, Linda, I don't know what to do about that one. Sorry.
Yeah. No problem.
We'll see what happens when I click the next slide and if it comes up or something. Okay. All right. Goodness. All right. Folks do have some work to do and are trying to be consistent. So great. Well, thank you everybody for showing. And all right, Linda, now can you see this? Did it do anything for you?
Yep.
All right, cool. All right, so yeah, do your organizational homework, and it's good to hear that people have thought of that through, and hopefully provide you some tools to help you with through this training and even today. So, all right, so now we're going to start talking about delegation, because this is another component. And when you think about what it is that volunteers are doing, what paid staff are doing, is we're delegating work to build some capacity, delegating work, maybe releasing work for folks to do other than ourselves, or maybe it's somebody else within the organization. All right, I'm going to use Menti again. I'd like you to hear is what are some words starting with M, like marvelous, when it comes to mind when you think of the word delegate. And again, it's menti.com, 6484 114. What are words that when you hear the word delegate, how does it make you feel? Assign, mentor. Think of words starting with M, just makes it more challenging. Master. Meaningful. Ooh, cool. Move responsibilities. Manageable. Other things that may come to mind. I can't gotta move my little screen here so I can see some more. Help. Mentor, efficiency, motivating. What? Managing, multitasking. Oh, that's a new one for us. Wonderful. Motivating, manage, manager, mentor, manageable. Efficiency. Ooh, like to see that. Even though it's not M, that's an awesome one when it comes to delegation. Assertive. Cool. Mesh. Oh, that's a good one, Aaron. Cool. Give people just a little bit more time here. I love to see mentor out there because I think a lot of times we don't necessarily think of when we delegate that we could mentor or have someone else mentor. Oh, make it happen. Cool. Got some good wordsmithers out there. Awesome.
You know what I think happens is if you put a word in,
Yeah.
it won't let you refresh the screen. If, like, let's say I wanted to write another word until you go past the screen.
Oh.
That makes sense?
Yep, it does. Okay. I'm not sure what that's about.
I guess you only get one crack at
I guess you just get one crack at it. I thought it said it like you could put in 3. But
Yeah, you can't put in 3, right?
okay. You just have to do it all at the
at
one
the
time,
same
maybe?
time. Right.
All right. All right.
The first time.
Okay. There you are. Cool. All right. Well, thank you. I think that's a great word cloud there. And by the way, I'll share these slides with everybody after our session. And so, you know, folks can kind of go back and revisit this if you'd like to, or want to share it with others. So, so there you go. But yeah, some great words when it does come to delegating, and what I really like is I don't see too many negative ones. Like messy is something that might come up from time to time, because it does. So these are all real positive, and love it. So thank you. How do you perceive your success in delegation to others? Okay. This is again another Menti, 6484114. How do you think you're doing at it? Need some work. Others. You're sharing your experiences. Great. How do you feel about it? It helps to work-life balance, which is great. Good. I suck. Thank you for your honesty. I know, very easy to just do it yourself. How many times as we've heard, if you want to get it done right, you got to do it yourself. Ooh, love it. Ask my staff, not me. Delegation is much needed growth areas. Lots of, yeah, a lot of people, it can be challenging. Mixed bags, sometimes well received, sometimes not. Others. Time consuming. Yeah, thanks, Linda. Exactly. It does take time. Okay, need some work. It's hard to let go. Yeah. Somebody loves to hand out their tasks and help others grow and discover their own strengths. Really good. That's kind of been one of my learnings, is that especially with things that I like to do, that the reason I probably like to do that is that it's fun. And so once I've maybe gotten that skill taken care of, I can hand things off to other people and see where they go with it. So definitely, we all can either improve or work towards improvement, or be comfortable with it when it comes to delegating, but it can be a challenge. So let's see. Okay. So what is delegation? I mean, people have been answering the various questions without really having a definition there, but it really is accomplishing that mission or the goals of the organization through the work of others. And that could be volunteer or could be paid. What I really like kind of that second phrase there, it is an art. It's letting go, which is hard. Someone acknowledged that in the previous slide there, but it's also you're letting go while you're staying in charge, which is kind of hard, because it's kind of you need to let go and then see what happens. But to kind of help us get there, it is assigning those mutually agreed upon results, meaning that we're just not saying, here, go do this, without any direction, but we may agree on what it is that we're going to be doing or having our volunteers or staff do. And then we're also providing them, first of all, the means of authority that they're able to go and do something on their own, but then we're also going to support those folks. It's not just that they're out there on their own. We're going to maybe have them come back and check in with us, which gets into that next piece. It's a follow-up system. And I kind of like that phrase, you're able to inspect what you expect. So again, it's just not letting go. We're going to check in from time to time. So we're going to continue to talk more about delegation, because again, it really gets to the heart of what volunteers do, as well as what our paid staff do. So a lot of difficulties can come up when it comes to delegation. And so, you know, number one there, it's that attitudes of releasing work. And a lot of organizations really, you know, the busier you look, the busier you are, you might be rewarded for that, versus someone who's effectively allowing others to do the work, thus building your own capacity and getting more done through others. Some folks might not understand what the delegation is. Some folks might think you're just trying to get out of maybe doing something, when actually, again, you're building your own capacity having others assist you with what you're doing. And again, getting into that lack of organizational rewards for someone who effectively delegates. Like people want to look busy. I think back to the time of the Great Recession, you know, in 2008, people were putting in 60, 80 hours for fear that they'd be let go, that they weren't working hard enough. And I suspect we'll find when some studies are done after the COVID pieces too, and what people actually were doing from their own homes, we're going to see more of that there's a sense of having to look busy instead of allowing others to effectively delegate to others and have them build our capacity. Staff buy-in is part of the key then to the success. And it's not only our own buy-in, but it's that buy-in with others. So we do need to work with others to develop positions that then can build their capacity and therefore, of course, the organization. You do want to start small and build off of the successes, not only of your own, but of others. You know, and it's a great thing where you might have, you might be able to highlight what somebody's been able to do, not only what the volunteer maybe has done, but then what the staff person was able to do in addition to that work that volunteer was able to handle that. So you want to share those success stories. It's kind of like finding a champion within the organization who's going to, you know, who's doing successful delegation with volunteers, and both the volunteer and the staff then can become your delegation success story, but also your delegation champions. So think about who would buy into this, and it's in addition to yourself, and who can share the stories of what good delegation can lead to. All right, so we're going to move into a little bit of an exercise here for you that kind of is related to this, and it's called dreams and wishes. And so what I'd like you to do is to either, you know, on a tablet or piece of paper or whatever you have handy, you know, I'm going to give you a minute here, so I'll time you. So find that piece of paper or pen now or whatever you're going to type on. I'd like you to develop a list of tasks. And these are tasks that you want to get done, you don't have time to do, things you don't like to do, things you're overqualified for, maybe you don't have the skills for. Tasks that you would have a full-time paid person assigned to you, somebody who's going to follow around only you and do whatever it is that you ask of them. Come up with a list of tasks, all right? I'm going to get my little timer out here and give you an official minute in which to do this. So on your mark.
Task for the task for the organization or in our personal?
This could be things at work. It could be for the organization. So if you can tie it that way, but if it's personal stuff you want to add onto that list, you go right ahead. Whatever is going to be the most used for you. Okay. All right. So I'm going to give you on your mark, get set, go. You got a minute. Come up with that list of tasks. Things you want to get done. Ideally around the workplace, maybe it's the organization, could be at home.
For FY20, it's $3,799. You have on your 440 $5,135. That's a difference of
All right, you got about 30 seconds left here. If we were all together in the same room, I'd encourage you to keep your eyes on your own paper because this is just your list. Got about 10 seconds left here. All right, pens, paper, fingers away from the keyboard, down. What I'd like you to do then is develop or circle, put a check by what's the one task that would be the most helpful to you to get done. What's really going to be the most beneficial to you, to the organization to get done. And what I'd like you to do, feel free to just unmute yourself there and share with us what's, you know, one thing that what's the one thing that's on your list? What's going to be most helpful for you? Let's go ahead.
Someone to do IT
Hello,
work.
this is Deborah.
Okay, I heard someone say someone to do IT work, and could a volunteer do that?
Yes.
Good answer. Yes. All right. You've just delegated. Awesome. Now, Deborah, I heard you, you had something. What would you share?
Mine was meeting minutes.
Could a volunteer do that?
Yes.
Awesome. Good answer. Let's take one more. Someone else. What's the top of your list?
Well, like greeting or intake when somebody at the front desk when people come in.
So if I heard that correctly, and like a greeter, a welcome person.
Yeah, get them signed in and talking to who they need to talk to.
Awesome. Could a volunteer do that?
Absolutely.
Good answer. Cool. I see Cynthia's put in the chat there too, administrative tasks. I am going to assume, Cynthia, yes, if a volunteer could do all of the things that people have just mentioned there, with, of course, we'd want to have the appropriate training in place for them, you know, and forms signed, especially if it, you know, I was thinking of the greeting, you'd want to, there's probably some things around confidentiality that would have to occur, but volunteers could do all of the things that you've mentioned. There's a reason that I have encouraged, or that we've done this exercise, and what I'd encourage you to do it is maybe with some other staff people. Where do you think this could this type of exercise would be helpful within your own organization, other than identifying tasks that people would do? Where could it help you when it comes to delegation? Feel free to throw that in the chat. Carrie shared identifying organization resources. Yes, volunteers could also do with that as well. But where might this exercise help you when it comes to delegation? Feel free to share in the chat. At home. Yeah, you're married. Thinking more of the office situation. Where could this help? Learn how to give up control and identify best deliver those services. Yes. Anything else? To see the areas where you're lacking and help. Yeah, it really can help. But how about the benefit of doing it with a staff person, another staff person, or volunteers? Thinking about volunteer capabilities, definitely. It does help highlight individual strengths and talents. Drea, yes, it's excellent. So to be inclusive, you're engaging folks. Carrie, good idea, you know, use it as a staff meeting. The key word here is buy-in. In one organization I worked for, it was my responsibility to bring in new volunteers and engage them throughout the whole organization, but I didn't necessarily supervise those staff who were going to be working with volunteers. Yet here I am supposed to be bringing in volunteers, and I was actually able to do that. Bring in new folks and create new ideas for ways of engaging volunteers. And yet I had one holdout who was just a really good friend of mine. And she kept telling me that in her department that there was no way that they could engage volunteers. And this was a case management type of situation where clinical staff were working, you know, with clients. And so, you know, I tried to kind of think of ways that we could engage folks with her, and just happened to go to a training where we did this exercise, and the light bulb kind of went on. It's like, instead of me coming in and saying, hey, why don't you know, we can get volunteers to do A, B, and C, have her come up with the list. And by golly, she sat down with me. We went, you know, through this list of tasks, and we were able to come up with something for a volunteer to do within her department. And even better, I was able to find a really good and outstanding volunteer to help. You know, so I think I was lucky in that respect as well. Not only was it an engaging thing for them to do, but we got the right person into the right position. And for all I know, the other person is still there. But it really got that staff person to get some buy-in, that she could see that there were ways that volunteers could help, you know, with the right training and all of that. So I encourage you to think about that. If you are trying to engage volunteers in different ways, if you are the volunteer coordinator and you're getting some resistance, instead of coming in here, hey, we can help you, have staff come up with some ideas. And it does help with yourself too. A good practice is for as leadership, as volunteer engagement professionals, that we use volunteers in our own jobs too. And so every once in a while I have to sit down and come up, what else could I have volunteers do, especially in my office setting. So, all right, that is the dreams and wishes exercise for y'all. We'll move on to our key concept number 3. I just realized before I started today, I should have mentioned that I do have 2 rather large German Shepherd dogs at home with me here. Normally I try to keep them out of the space I'm training from, but when I do that, they destroy the house. So I will just let you know that from time to time, you might hear dogs bark when the mail is delivered. So far, so good, but just in case you hear something strange, that could be my dogs. All right, key concept number 3 then is it's important to understand and appreciate the potential benefits of delegation, and to practice some cardinal rules of effective delegation. So I'm going to share these cardinal rules with you here. And what I'm going to do is go through each of these to kind of give you an example of how it's worked within my own organization to hopefully help define those, okay? So as I mentioned, I've been with our Extension Master Gardener volunteer program now for about 15 years. And one of the things that really appealed to me when I applied is that there were no special events. Okay, the Hennepin County provides us with our funding, and we do raise some money so that we can do volunteer appreciation and maybe buy equipment or seeds that we use in our educational opportunities. But there's no special event, which in my background as a volunteer engagement professional, I've done my share of walks and state fair booths. I was very happy to see. However, we ended up losing a volunteer opportunity that did help us raise money. And all of a sudden we found ourselves rather short when it came to being able to provide effective volunteer appreciation. So we had to do something. And it just so happened that a group of our volunteers went out to Milwaukee to a Master Gardener volunteer convention that was out there. And they came back and said, oh, those Milwaukee volunteers do a plant sale and they're raising $50,000 annually from a plant sale. Let's do a plant sale here in Hennepin County. Well, as I mentioned, I was really not excited to think about having to take on a special event. I also did not have the time to do a special event. There are other parts of my job that I just need to do. The thought of planning and meetings and my background is volunteer engagement. It is not horticulture, and I don't know the first thing to do a plant sale. But they came back and Milwaukee gave us the plan. So that first thing in that cardinal rule of delegation is to assess the work assignment and the corresponding abilities and the availability of a volunteer. I had a team of 4 that were ready and raring to go. I felt that they had the passion. I had no way to really assess it, but just based on their passion, I thought, well, let's see what's going to happen with this. Move on to that second one, to give the assignments in terms of results. Well, what was great is that Milwaukee provided that plan for us. So it was a fairly easy result. We're going to have a plant sale and we're going to raise money. So, okay, it's going to be successful. We're going to do plants. The other piece of this plant sale is that we needed to go into volunteers' yards, dig up the plants, pot them, and then put them up for sale. So it's not like we were just going to order a bunch of plants. We were actually digging up in each other's locations. So to find the level of control, I truly had to, and this is my motto of the day, let go and let the volunteer. So my level of control was, I could not go to meetings. I was welcome, happy to go to any meeting that they wanted me to come and answer questions to, but I just couldn't go to a bunch of them. And the other piece I asked for is, would they send me the minutes of any meetings that they had, so I could at least review and have a sense of what they were doing and what they were up to. So far, so good. Communicate the guidelines. Again, we had a master plan out of Milwaukee, and it really was a timeline as to when plants needed to be dug up and potted to actually the day of the sale and everything that had to go on there. And the interesting piece of this is that the plant sale did need to, we needed to have our plants in pots a month before the sale. And by the way, those of you familiar with Minnesota, the plant sale occurred on the third Saturday in May. It's kind of hard to find things in your yard to dig up and put in a container, you know, at the end of April. All right, so next piece was to make resources available. And so there was some equipment that people wanted to purchase. And so they told me how much they needed. I believe it was around $4,000. And so we have a process in place, requested those funds, and we made those resources available to the volunteers. The criteria for success was really A, that we would have the sale, but B, I did ask them to raise back the $4,000 that we invested. Okay. So that really was my criteria. Let's just, we're just going to raise what we put into it. And of course, they were all about, oh, we are going to have $50,000 because we're just like Milwaukee. We did set up those checkpoints, as I mentioned. I would get minutes. People would invite me to meetings if they needed to. And throughout the whole process, I did provide recognition, honored those people. We have monthly meetings, and so would call people out for the work that they were doing. And we certainly celebrated at the end of the project. So my question for you, and feel free to put this in the chat, how much money do you think that we raised that first year? And my criteria for success was $4,000. How much money do you think you came in? Whether you're doing that, I will say volunteers took this completely on. I had to do nothing but show up the day of the sale with the cash box, and I forgot the cash box. So I just want to share, be careful what you ask for sometimes. And I just love the first number that came in was 7K. Do you know what? It was 8K. We raised $8,000 that very first sale. So double what was expected. Now, the cool part was is then the next year, it went up to $16,000. And by then I'm going, okay, I'm done with no special events. We're going to have a plant sale for the rest of my tenure here with the Minnesota Master Gardener Program. And indeed, we have raised as much as $42,000. We've never hit that $50,000 mark. But that's fine because having the amount of money that we have had come in was great. The reason I like to kind of share this is that, if I had said no, if I had not delegated to volunteers, this would not have happened. I think we'd still be kind of scrounging around for funds to support our various activities. It was so successful that now we have 2 special events, including a learning garden tour, which is usually held in July. So we have 2 streams of funding. Of course, haven't been able to do that the last year and probably won't be doing it this year due to the whole COVID situation. But anyway, delegating, it can work. It's been my little success story. The theme of the day, let go and let the volunteer. Obviously, it's not just saying, here, go do this. You have those 8 parameters put in place, but you too could have a successful event. All right. Now we're going to start talking about developing those position descriptions. So I've kind of gone through, that organizational readiness. Are we ready to bring in volunteers? And then the next piece is the delegating. Have we thought about it? Can we delegate it? Do we have a culture of delegation where it's okay and we're rewarded for delegating? And now we really start putting into place that whole piece of developing those position descriptions. The key concept then, number 4, is really understanding those trends in volunteering when we do write our position descriptions. And when you think about it, it makes an awful lot of sense because we're not operating in a vacuum. There are things going on in the world, there are things going on in our field that are going to affect the type of things that volunteers do, but kind of getting at what do they want to do and what are they going to expect when they come to us. So have you used our Menti again, menti.com, 6484114. What changes are you seeing in how volunteers want to be involved and what they expect? What changes are you seeing in your organization when it comes to what volunteers want to, how they want to be involved and what they expect? Because things look different. They look different, obviously, now than they did even a year ago. But things look different than they did 5 years ago, and it's certainly very different than they were 25 years ago. What changes are you seeing within your own organization? Menti.com 6484 114. Are you seeing changes out there? They want equity with paid staff. Yes. I like to think that we have paid staff and unpaid staff. They're both just as important. Volunteers want to be told what to do. Yep. Need to ask more questions, assign questions. COVID restrictions are lifted. Implement volunteers who have complete community service requirements. Yeah. So using community service, folks. Want to be more involved with staff. Generational differences. Younger volunteers more interested in short term. Yeah, key. That for sure. Volunteering for short term. Yep, not staying as long. Volunteer wants to walk in their authority and expect guests to respect that authority. Okay. So kind of a combination. They want the they want the responsibility, and then others don't. They don't want to spend the time. Some are just happy to be doing something. Yeah. Let's see if we have any more out there. More people looking for service that provide, yeah, resume. People want to be able to put volunteerism or some kind of community engagement on their resume. And for, if you think of younger people too, especially getting into college or even, in high school, folks want to be able to say that they were volunteering for various projects. All right, so great list here. And I'll just share some, whoops, I'm gonna go back and see what that last one was there. Still see a high interest in volunteering, but lower long-term follow-through. That is key. I'll share with you, I feel a little bit like a hypocrite sometimes with this one. I've had Master Gardener volunteers that have been with our program now for over 30 years, and it is so rare when I talk to other folks. But I feel so lucky to have that. And compared to other organizations, we've just been very lucky that people tend to stay. And that is actually one of the issues I struggle with as a volunteer engagement professional, is that I've got a team of about 700 volunteers and people don't leave. And last year we had 185 apply to the program. And while we try to take as many people as we can, it does, if it wasn't for the volunteers stepping up and doing things, I wouldn't be able to take on as many volunteers as we've got in the program. Because up until last year, it was just me coordinating folks. So truly believe in delegation, that volunteers can do just about anything we have them do. So a little bit more on these trends then. These are from a study that was done in both 2014 and 2018. And interestingly enough, between those years, things really didn't change much. Our MAVA members are about 800 or so across the state of Minnesota and beyond. The majority are seeing an increase in that short-term volunteering, as somebody had mentioned, that they're more than happy to give us this time. They're just not giving us as much time as what they've done in the past. We've got an increase of, or a percent of people seeing the increased interest in volunteering on the evenings and the weekends. So if we're not providing those types of opportunities, we should. That folks are looking for that type of an opportunity. The other thing is what was referenced back with that resume piece, is that people are interested in using their workplace skills. And so maybe they not only want to use them, but want to get better at them as well. Another piece is that there is the whole virtual volunteering. And of course, in 2018, would we ever have thought that we'd be in the virtual world that we are now? And I will say, while in my own organization, we had been thinking of virtual volunteering, COVID, forced us into virtual volunteering. And so it'll be interesting to see how we go forward. And I'm sure many of you are going, boy, gardening and doing that online, how's that going to work? But we've actually been able to do some fairly good, sessions, just demonstrating with the camera online and not being with people. So I think probably many of us have maybe moved in that virtual volunteering now. The whole interest in politically motivated volunteering, I don't think we have to look far to see where our world is at. And even here in Minneapolis with the murder and death of George Floyd, the protests and everything that came from that, that's a form of volunteering. That could be viewed as political. The different elections that we've got, political, of course. We're seeing more folks kind of volunteering with causes that's always been there, but we've seen an increase in that interest of that. We've got folks, that Generation Z are getting engaged, which every once in a while I'll hear people say, oh, those lazy kids or whatever. And it's not the case. They're getting engaged. I think all we have to do is look at what happened in Florida, I believe, where there was the school shooting. And boy, within a month, those kids were organized and at the Capitol, talking about gun control or pieces related to that, making their schools safer. There are increasing barriers to the regulations and requirements related to volunteering. In my own organization, we have background checks, and that can be a turnoff for individuals. And but it's a university policy, and I'm kind of stuck with it. So the more barriers we put in place, of course, the harder it is for people to volunteer. So I encourage you to kind of look at that. Somebody had mentioned maybe the sentence to serve folks. Hopefully we're able to engage them without having to do a background check, or maybe we can take what they're coming to us on that background check. So as I mentioned, my hands are tied. I've in many organizations, I've used sentence to serve individuals and had such good luck, and many people have come on and become long-term volunteers because of that. But depending on what the situation was, we're not allowed to do that with the university, which is too bad. So, but we keep trying to change that. We'll see where it goes. And then lastly, again, that rapid change in the use of technology. And I think technology has really changed not only how and what people are doing volunteering, but how we engage people. Like we've moved our entire volunteer sign up online. People do need to go online in order to sign up for our various activities. So it truly is changing, or has changed. Kind of related to this, I'd like you to ask is, what state do you think ranks #1 in the United States when it comes to volunteerism? And so again, use your Menti 64 84 11 4. What state is it? Alaska, Utah, Iowa, Wisconsin, or Minnesota? Take your best bet. Got 4 with Minnesota. Got a Utah. Someone going for Alaska. All right. We'll let just a few more come in here. We got an Iowa. I'm thinking we got no one from Wisconsin on the call today. As it's just sitting down there kind of lonely. Give people just a few more minutes here. All right, I do wish I had prizes that I could give to everybody, but anyway, the winner is, when it comes to the #1 is Utah. Utah is #1. Minnesota, #2. We're #2. Yay. But yeah, Utah is #1, followed by Minnesota. Does anyone know why? You could just throw this in the chat. Why is Utah #1 when it comes to the percentage of its population volunteering? Throw it in the chat. Why is Utah #1? Efrain, yes, correct. Mormons, Jeremy, you too. It is the the Mormons and related to religion, providing 2 years of service. So Utah will, chances are as long as I've been around, they've been #1, and chances are they'll remain there. Minnesota has kind of gone up and down. We've been as low as, we've always been in the top 10, it seems. We have a strong culture of volunteerism here in the state. And we are, have been #2 now for, I believe it's been about 2 years. I'll just give you the top 10 here. It goes Utah, Minnesota, Oregon, Iowa, Alaska. Alaska is in there. Nebraska. They included Washington, D.C., Montana, Maine, and Idaho. One thing about Montana and Idaho, I didn't realize there's also a larger Mormon population in those states as well, kind of the southwest of the United States next to Utah, and so we do see the numbers rise a little bit there. Iowa is another interesting state to watch because I believe this information is from 2018. Whenever there's a presidential election, Iowa kind of goes up because of all the different caucuses and the things going on down there in Iowa. So it's an interesting thing to keep track of. The reason I like to share this information with folks too is to really realize that if you're in the state of Utah or in Minnesota, you've got that strong culture of volunteerism. So it's good to know. I believe the number in Minnesota is around 43-45% of the state's population does volunteer. So one way to look at that is like, oh my gosh, half the state's volunteering. What do I do to engage the other half of the state? So it's kind of a good piece to know if there's a culture, or if we're from a state that it's lower, it's like, well, what could be done? Why aren't people stepping up? All right, another one to look at here. What American city or metro area ranks first in volunteerism? You've got 5 choices there. You've got Columbus, Ohio, Kansas City, Missouri, Kansas, Minneapolis, St. Paul, Salt Lake City, Utah, the Seattle, Tacoma, Bellevue, Washington area. So those 5 areas, what do you think? We got Salt Lake is coming up there. Oops, Seattle, #2. 3 going back. Can't decide. Salt Lake. Got a Minneapolis now, St. Paul. Believe it or not, the winner is Minneapolis, St. Paul. Yay, we are #1. And we have been for a while. Minneapolis, St. Paul has been #1. I believe it's the last 5 years when it comes to the metropolitan areas. I'd like to think of this for 2 reasons. #1, of course, is the wonderful work that MAVA is doing. And so not only in the state, but in the metro area, we have some very well-trained volunteer engagement professionals. So hopefully volunteers have a great experience with those MAVA memberships. The other piece is Minneapolis has got the oldest volunteer center in town. It's now combined with the Twin Cities. It's called Hands-On Twin Cities, but it was established right at the start of World War I. So it's been around for over 100 years. It is the oldest in the country. And so I'd like to think the work that was done at that time around volunteerism and continued on a local level has helped contribute to that. The other thing, so #1 is we've got #1 we have MAVA. #2 we've got Hands-On Twin Cities. #3 is that in the Minneapolis, St. Paul area, we have a lot of corporations that support volunteerism as well. So you've got groups like 3M that provide some paid time off for volunteerism, General Mills, there's a corporate volunteerism council. So where people work, they're really getting that word out about volunteering. So it helps us remain in that top 5 there. All right. So just a little bit more then when it comes to these trends and thinking about what's going on in the world when it comes to volunteering. The last statistics, we got over about 30% of Americans are volunteering. Again, Minnesota's higher than that, about 47%. We've got folks of both who are white and of color volunteering in the state as well as the country. And then almost 50% too when it comes to the Twin Cities volunteering. So again, we've got a pretty high volunteerism rate locally here in the Twin Cities. As I mentioned, we've got, we're number 2. Other things to know. Where are people volunteering? So kind of the thought of what type of activity, what do people like to do? So number 1 is that religious or the community of faith. And sadly, what they don't really break down there is that that could be volunteering at your church or your community of faith, your synagogue, whatever that looks like. So volunteering within that community, but it could also be an organization that is focused on a certain religion, or so I think of Catholic Charities, Lutheran Social Services. It could be through organizations like that. The bottom line is that people are being motivated by whatever the religious affiliation is. The second piece where people are volunteering then is educational services. And if you think of that, it probably makes sense because of course parents are going to volunteer at the schools where their children are if they've got the time and the resources to do so. One of the jobs I've had in the past was with our Minnesota Office of Citizenship and Volunteer Services. And this was a state organization that was around for about 27 years that we kind of acted as a volunteer center for the state, but also collected data on where people volunteered. And what I found interesting there is that it always kind of went back and forth between the religious activity and the educational activities where people were volunteering. And I kind of put that down to birth rates as, if there's a little bit of a baby bust or boom, more people, depending on the year, more people were, volunteering at schools and such. So it doesn't bode well then necessarily for those of us in social services being down there kind of at number 3, but it is in the top 3, which is great, but there's quite a drop off there between the educational services and the educational activities and then social services. So it does give us a little bit of something that we do need to compete with. Just one tip of the day when we look at that is thinking, are there ways that our social service work could be tied? Is there some education we could do for volunteers around what it is that we're doing, or the things that our clients might experience? Can we do some training around that volunteers would view they're going to volunteer with us not only because they're giving back to the community, but they're also going to gain some education on the type of work that we're doing. So just something to think about with that. All right. So before moving on, it's good to know what is going on, what the trends are. Do we have opportunities? That short-term piece was mentioned. So do we have opportunities that people can maybe not give us their lifetime to volunteer, but could at least maybe give us 3 to 6 months, and that would be okay with us. Other things to then think through when it comes to designing a position. Can we offer a wide choice of volunteer opportunities? And that is something that has worked very well here within our Master Gardener program, is that our mission really is horticultural education. So how we do that, how we educate, can be everything from doing a stand-up presentation like I'm doing today, but it can be just working one-on-one with somebody in a community garden situation. So it's 2 different skill sets. It doesn't mean you have to stand up and do something formal. You could actually just go and have a conversation with somebody about gardening or sharing some best practices. So we have a very wide a range of things can do. We also have stuff that's going on in the background. I have volunteers working on our website. Volunteers work with youth. We're in schools. So there's really a wide variety of places that people can do their education. Currently, because of COVID, our volunteers are actually doing, they can actually do work at home. They could do a demonstration garden in their front yard and get some volunteer credit for that. We've mentioned earlier that short-term and seasonal volunteer opportunities. So are there things that people could just help us for a few moments? I'm a big believer in the short-term piece, that we might have to invest some time up front for a volunteer coming in for maybe just, even if it's a month or a short amount of hours. But if they have a good experience, I believe they will come back to us. So they might only be able to give so much time, but if it's good, if we've got good practices in place, they will come back. Or are there ways that we can engage those snowbirds? So we've got things for them to do when they're depending on where you are. But like for us here, a lot of folks go south for the winter. So what can they do during the summer while they're here versus when they're away? We do want to offer those skills-based or project management types of volunteer activities. So are there ways that volunteers can get some skills or explore skills? Project management can be one of those short-term things in. So instead of joining a committee that's going to meet forever, could it be a short-term project that a small group of people are going to work on, maybe over a couple of months? That's another way to get folks engaged. And again, kind of, are there opportunities that we can engage people both formally and informally? And I kind of alluded to that with what we're doing now with the Master Gardener program. We've got all these formal positions out there that people sign up and do, but might there be ways for volunteers to help someone that's related to the work that the organization does, but that they have permission to do? So like being able to do a demonstration garden in your front yard, or maybe a volunteer sees a need down the street from where they live. Is there a way that that could be a volunteer opportunity we might have not have thought of before? So we really need to kind of think outside the box when it comes to engaging folks these days. Kind of building more off of that skills-based volunteer piece, which is a big trend that we're seeing, is can we tap into the specialized skills, talents, or whatever of volunteers that are going to help our volunteer mission? Now, for me, a lot of people are coming to us with some gardening experience, but I'm finding a lot of them want to learn about gardening, and they're going to volunteer their time so that they can, they can give back, but they're going to be learning during that entire experience. So are there specific skills, credentials, or that's not available in general to the general population? And so for us, we're providing this Master Gardener title, a Master Gardener volunteer, that they can, kind of move towards. But are we seeking volunteers to have their skills or talents and really to be able to use them when they come? So I'm looking for folks who are going to kind of go beyond that horticultural piece. Can they be creative when it comes to educating others? Can they assist me with things that maybe need to get done in addition to the volunteer piece? So the things that people can build on or learn new when they are working within your organization. There's things to think about then when it comes to building those skills-based positions. And first of all, you want to create a culture that values skills, that maybe staff aren't threatened by having volunteers. I'm a firm believer in the skills-based piece, just simply because there's many things that I don't have the time or talent to do. And one of that is bookkeeping or numbers. So I have a volunteer bookkeeper. I totally trust what she does. She does this in her real life, loves to do it. We have checks and balances in place, of course, but I truly value that skill that she's bringing. In another case, like our website, what I know HTML 101, and that's about it. I really rely on volunteers to help keep our website looking fresh, updated, engaging others when it comes to using that skill. We need to work with staff to define those skills-based roles for volunteers. So, we're going to do a little exercise here. What are the ways that we're currently involving volunteers where they're using their skills, but might there be some new positions that would be useful to the organization? So, we're probably all, maybe without even having thought about it, really involving volunteers at that skill level. But then there might be some new ways. And we're going to put you in some breakout rooms here in just a couple seconds to kind of talk further about that. But lastly then is to really, start small. I encourage you to do it, to start thinking about how we can do some skills-based volunteer opportunities. And then really, again, it comes back to those champions when it comes to delegation. Are there people that we can, highlight, volunteers that we can highlight too, when it comes to doing some skills-based thing for the organization? Okay. With that, we're going to put you into some groups here, some small groups. I think, Wendy, we should probably go with groups of maybe 3 to 4. And I'll have folks think about our volunteer roles that you're currently using the skills of volunteers, and then maybe some new ideas on roles that you could use volunteers. The other thing I'm going to provide you with here is I'm going to have you collect that in something called idea boards, and I'm going to put this in the chat. What I'd like you to do is just share, the roles that you're currently using, the skills of volunteers, or those new ideas. All you do here to share something is just click on the plus, and you can just write in, I'm just going to write in test, but what are the roles that you're having volunteers doing? And then you just hit return. Now you're all gonna, even though you're in different small groups, you can all work off of the same thing. If you see that somebody else has a neat idea, you can just click on that idea, and so you don't have to write it. All right. So it's quite as simple as that. So I'm putting into the chat that idea board. Wendy is going to put us into those small groups. And Wendy, let's say, we'll give you about 6 or 7 minutes to spend some time with that. So again, if you click on, that'll take you off to the idea boards, 6 or 7 minutes, talk in those small groups, skills-based volunteerism that you're doing currently, and then some ideas. All right, take it away, Wendy. All right. All right, and just like that, they're all back. Wonderful. So let's take a look here at what you've been up to. So it looks like we got some great uses there of current volunteer roles, everything it looks like, from a front desk coordinator to doing some outreach to homeless communities. My goodness, just loving what you've got folks doing there. Support with events, pop-up distribution, awesome. So good to see you've got some skills-based roles already in place. And then those new ideas, hire a volunteer coordinator. All right, cool. Volunteer to coordinate a celebration. An administrative assistant, wonderful. Facilitate volunteer orientation. I love that idea of engaging volunteers when it comes to orientation and trainings, because while that is an integral part of my own job, and after all, I'm called an educator, it's one thing for me to do it, but to have volunteers do it and share their experiences and how they do it, I think goes a really long way with individuals. So way to think about that. And your other ideas too is doing the fine arts piece and sharing the recovery experience that way, or your community resource finder and coordinator. Great, just awesome work, folks. So thanks for sharing those again, and I will provide you, obviously you can keep the link that you want, but if you'd like to be reminded of these too, I'll provide the link and some recap materials for everybody so that you can come back and look at those, or if in case you forget something. So there you are. Okay. Basically the next the last part of our time together today then really is, we're finally going to get into it. We're going to start talking about position descriptions and the actual description itself and what needs to be into that. So position description should include all the essential information in an easy to understand format. Part of the reason I don't spend a heck of a lot of time at the session with this is just simply because folks can, I think a lot of people are familiar with their own position description. They've hopefully have position descriptions in place for volunteers already. So it's really a sense here to kind of just think through what could we be adding, or what could we be updating to what we already have, as well as maybe what haven't we defined yet within the program. And so let's talk about this a little bit here. So a good volunteer position design, it's going to be pivotal to the ultimate success of the volunteer program. And I used to say that the program hung off our volunteer program would hang off of our position descriptions, that it was really the foundation. Position descriptions are the foundation of the volunteer program. Because of the changes that we've seen with folks, it's not so much true anymore. We do need to find what volunteers do. I do feel that volunteers everything needs to be defined. What a volunteer does doesn't necessarily have to all look the same way, but we need to define what it is people are doing, what are their expectations. But the days of kind of just designing the position on our own, sitting at our desks saying this is what the volunteer is going to do, are pretty much gone, because people like to pick and choose what they're going to do. So you can come up with a really great position description, but chances are people are only going to do parts of it. So I encourage people to develop these positions with volunteers, with your current volunteers, even if it's a new position, and see where it goes. And so you might find somebody who's willing to do parts of it. Then you maybe break down that position and have develop a new position off of the components that aren't being met with your current position. Okay. The whole purpose of a description really is to provide volunteers with a clear description. What is it they're going to be doing? Think about a time maybe you yourself were given a position, description and didn't necessarily know what to do. I've kind of learned a lesson the hard way as being a volunteer myself in my own community garden. I have volunteered to annually lay out the plots within the garden. Okay, so after somebody comes in and plows up the space, I go through with a team of volunteers and plot out our spaces, which are about 15 by 15. The very first year I did that, it was not defined when I was going to do that. And would you believe, the night before, Friday night, I got a call, 6:30 p.m., just as I'm finishing up my meal, asking me to round up the volunteers and go out and plot the community garden plots. Well, I wasn't real happy with that. Needless to say, I did have a team there by 10 a.m. the next morning. But the bottom line, I had no description. No one told me I had to be on call 24 hours before, So now I've set some boundaries around when that actually takes place. There's still no written description, but at least I said, next year you got to give me more than 12 hours to round people up. So again, you need to have a clear description. You can use it as a tool for recruitment. I tend not to go to volunteer fairs anymore, but there used to be some within the Twin Cities here, and I would take a binder of our position descriptions and people could flip through it and say, oh, I would be interested in doing X, Y, and Z. Again, that's changed a lot because people might only want to do certain components of that position. It is a guide for screening volunteers. So if there's specific skills that you need someone to have to engage them in that position, the description, it's right there. You're not making this stuff up. It's written down. This is what we're going to need you to do. And these are the skills we need you to have. It can serve as a contract between the volunteer and the agency, not necessarily that's going to hold up in court or anything for you, but it really does. It's a way of showing that you take it seriously as the organization, but also that the volunteer is going to take it seriously. I mean, I don't know of any nonprofit organization that does not have a position description in place for their paid staff. So to me, it sets that you want the same thing for the volunteers. As I think somebody in one of the chat situations had mentioned, volunteers want to be viewed on par with staff. Well, this is one way to do that. You're showing that you're investing in them as much as they're investing in you. And then, last but not least, it's that information about job responsibility. What is it that people are going to be doing for us? The position is really a tool when it comes to accepting volunteers, but you do need to be flexible. As I mentioned earlier, people might only be willing to do parts of the description. So can you adapt it to really meet that potential volunteer or even a current volunteer skills and interest? What can we do? Is there a way not to be so set in stone that, it's my way or the highway? This is how we're going to do it. So these are, pieces that are, in the ideal position description. I would encourage you to look at your own organization's position descriptions, and can you adapt those descriptions to volunteer descriptions? Not that they're doing the same thing, but using the same type of verbiage. And the reason I bring that up is that, again, getting back to seeing the volunteers and staff at same levels, that can help. Because if paid staff see the position is, in a similar format as their own, they can, I think, will start to take it a little seriously when it comes to the volunteers. I've seen some organizations where the paid staff position is very formal and has the words that you see in front of you, and then maybe the volunteers is what I would call, for lack of better words, fluffy. Might have flowers and butterflies on it because they're volunteers, and it's like, that might work maybe at a children's hospital or something where you're engaging with youth some way, and you want it to look maybe less formal. But I think in general, people expect it to look on par. It's professional, that kind of a deal. I'm not going to walk through all of these, different areas, because I think it's fairly, I don't know, they're fairly common things that we see. But things you might not have thought of before is, do put the purpose of the organization on the description. You might need, you could put a mission, the organizational mission, but also, kind of the goal or the purpose of the position. What's the point? What's the ultimate goal? Why have this position? I mentioned the whole mission piece. You do want to think about, what are the responsibilities that the volunteer is going to have, and it's really that major piece. It's something that is new that people are looking for, is that impact. It's kind of the so what. By doing this position, it might be gaining some skills, but it's also, what's the impact on the community by engaging a volunteer in this way? What's maybe the outcome as well. Obviously, qualifications, what is needed, what are the skills needed, providing the benefits to the volunteer. It does get at that, what's in it for me. So it's beyond the impact to the community. They also, what skills are they going to get out of it? Maybe it's not even skills. There might be a perk to it. It could just be as simple as engaging at a different level within the organization. Obviously, people want to know the supervisor, the time commitment, their work location, the signatures of the volunteer and the supervisor can be a key point of having that on a position description. That is something I currently don't do within my own organization, just simply because we have so many volunteers. And our volunteers, when they apply to the organization, kind of sign off that they'll follow. We have just tons of position descriptions. So there's like a basic one that you're signing on as a Master Gardener volunteer. But then we defined every single thing that a volunteer is going to do. So in order to track all those signatures, this just would become too time consuming for us. But having a signature on there, especially if you just maybe have 2 or 3 things that a volunteer is going to do within the organization, not only shows the investment of the volunteer to the organization, but it also shows you as the supervisor, as a representative of the organization, that you're invested too. It's kind of a good way to just show that you're going to work together. And it's not just the volunteer giving you stuff, you're going to give back to the volunteer as well in some way. So again, I encourage you to look at maybe what's in your paid staff positions when it comes to the words here. There might be like some cultural or organizational cultural references that you might need to have on there. I think especially when it comes to the qualifications piece, if you want volunteers who are coming from the recovery community, spell that out. In this position, you need to have gone through something. So just some thoughts there when it comes to the positions. Again, you do want to define everything that a volunteer is going to do. It doesn't necessarily have to be that formal, depending on what it is that they're doing. So when I think of event volunteers, say, I used to work for the Minnesota AIDS Project, and we have an annual walk here in Minnesota. So we defined most of the positions, and especially like we had people handling money. So those positions were really well defined because we had to track where the money was going. But we also defined, if you're going to help clean up garbage, we just had people who we called them the cleaners. They would come in after the event. We didn't have a position description that was this formal, but we did have a paragraph that we gave everybody, and it just was like where they needed to meet, what time, and who to report to, and what was expected. People did need to wear gloves. Told them where they could find, the garbage containers, all that kind of fun stuff. But it was defined, and it's just a one-time deal. But again, it wasn't this formal, but you need to think about it. All right, we are going to move back into the small group activity here, and we're going to go back to the idea boards. This time it's going to be a different one. And I'm going to share a position description with you, and I'm going to have you evaluate it on what do you think works with it, what could be better, and are there any changes that you would make? All right, so in the chat, I'm going to share a link out to this idea board. So it's there now. Again, what works in the description, what could be better, and then are there any changes that you would make? I'm also going to share with you then a file, which is our volunteer support chair that we use here within the Master Gardener Volunteer. And this is an actual chair on our leadership team. So in lack of other words, it's kind of like a board position. But volunteers also work on our board. So our meetings are pretty much, discussion based and planning and all that kind of fun stuff. But in this position is someone who's assisting with the support of our new and existing volunteers. With that, we will have Wendy put you into groups. And Wendy, let's put people into new groups this time, if you would like. And I would say that groups of 3 to 4 would be just fine. Use the idea boards. We'll give you about 10 minutes here to kind of look through that. Again, what works, what doesn't, what would you change? And just like that, you're all back. So I'll share my screen here. We'll go take a look. And oh, there are things to change on my wonderful position description. Goodness. All right. Well, thank you all for providing the various feedback. Yeah, good to see you felt it was detailed and kind of comprehensive there. We have benefits and all that kind of fun stuff. Could be shorter. It doesn't have the time expectations, definitely. Designed for entry level. It kind of go back and forth on that one simply because generally somebody who comes into this position does have more experience with the program. That should be defined within the program as well. It definitely can be overwhelming. Totally agree. Is a little bit specific, and it's a simple word presentation. Yeah, with friendlier language. Now, love that. What is kind of fun about this is that I actually did this with volunteers, not only the volunteers currently in the position, but 2 other volunteers who are on the leadership team. So we actually redid all of our positions last year, and this is what they ended up with. So yeah, I agree. They tend to like it formal, and I go back and forth because I engage the people who are doing the job. So I'm like, well, okay, if this is what they want. But I agree, and especially as we get younger volunteers into the program too, that we need to be a little bit more, how should we say, I'm not sure if it's inclusivity, but more, I don't know, hip or something. So anyway, thank you for the feedback on that. Greatly appreciate it. Hopefully it was a exercise. I include you to do the same thing with your own position descriptions. Sit down with staff, sit down with volunteers, kind of review. Could it be simpler? Do we need more details? What is it exactly that we need to define better? All right. You'll see the last piece there too is ideas for a catchy title. Do you have, volunteer support actually, I think, defines that position better than what it used to be called, which was membership chair. because what does what does membership mean? We also try to think of our volunteers as volunteers, and they're not joining a club, they're coming to volunteer. So that's where we ended up with volunteer support, but there might be something more fun and flashy to use. You don't want to kid folks, and I also believe too with the name, when it comes to paid staff, you again talking about that on par piece, you don't want to get too far out there, but it might be worth looking at titles too when it comes as well. All right. So just a few things here. There is additional resources out there for you. You'll see handout 8 in the handout, so that suggests some reading material for you. We don't really go into a lot of orientation and training within the series, and so attachment B does have an outline for volunteer orientation. So obviously when you have positions defined, you want to have take some time and do some you have the position, you want to train somebody or orientate them to the position. So think about that, and that does give you a nice outline for it. Let's see here. I'm going to go back to the question I asked when we started today. Should you define everything a volunteer does with your organization? Again, using your menti.com, 64, 84, 11, 4. Should you define everything a volunteer does for your organization? Yes, no, or maybe? We've got a resounding yes, 2 of them. I know, maybe. It's looking a little different than it did this morning. No, maybe. Let's see where we go. Let just a few more people respond. It's too funny. I think it's split evenly between no and maybe this morning. And now we're kind of at the yes and no. I would encourage you to define everything a volunteer does do with the organization. It doesn't have to be as formal, but to define a paragraph that people are going to do with the organization. I encourage you to do that because it sets those expectations and helps a volunteer know what they're going to do with the organization. With that, I'm going to open her up here for questions, and I think what we could do is have people either raise their hand or put it into the chat there. We could unmute you. I'd be more than happy to answer some questions here for the last 5 minutes of our time together. Oh, go ahead, Linda.
Okay, so that question was a little bit subjective, and I thought that we wanted to have volunteer input, so that is why I chose my answer.
Very good. Yeah, definitely. Do engage the volunteers with that. Yeah, that's a good way to, for sure. Because I think the trend has always been that we just define those things on our own, never asking if people, want to help us, or, what has the experience been? And especially when it comes to, some people mentioned that it's a big job, and so is there a way that it could be broken down? And I'll be honest with you too, this the position was split in 2 a couple of years ago, and we're kind of learning too that it probably could be split even further. So cool. Other questions?
Yeah, hi, I'm the program director for a peer recovery support center here in Massachusetts, and we're very new. But just recently, I've had 2 people come forward and offer to volunteer to run a hiking and recovery group and a Dharma and recovery group. And I didn't have to do anything in that, like, they just volunteered to do this. Except that, we were open and we created a place that felt safe for them to do this. But I felt like, I don't know, you call it like an organic kind of process that seemed attractive to me. And not because I don't have to do any work, but just that it was like true interest, authentic.
That is real. That's a great example, Jeremy. I feel like some of our best programming comes from the volunteers themselves. You know, the things, the beauty of where I work is that the university has some expectations, but they don't necessarily tell us how we're going to do it. I had a volunteer who was affected, her family's been affected by Alzheimer's and early dementia. And she created we can now call growing connections for folks who are newly diagnosed with dementia. Never would have thought of that. And it started here in Hennepin, it's now gone statewide. It's gotten some press. I mean, it's, as you said, it's organic. I never would have thought of it. Luckily, I was able to provide her with the tools she needed to do it. But yeah, it's just incredible. And another one that came to us too is, and thanks to COVID, we're doing virtual garden tours for people in long-term health facilities who can't get out into nature, but we know, that nature is good for us, but they can't get out even if there wasn't COVID. And so again, that came from a volunteer. We defined what it is that she and others are going to do, and we're able to go with it. So yeah, I think if you take anything away other than let go and let the volunteer, we also need to be open to what people want to do. All right, probably have time for one more question today. All right, with that, I can turn her over to Wendy or Cindy or whoever needs to go from there. Thank you so much for your participation again, for all the wonderful work that you're all doing. Awesome. Keep it up. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. Have a great day. Again, I'll have the recording for this up on the webpage that you all share. If you miss anything or want to review anything, it'll just take me about a day to get that up. So, and you'll be notified before the next session as well. So thanks, Terry, Wendy, you guys are awesome. Thanks all. Email
Thank
me if
you.
you have any questions. Bye.
This is excellent. Thank you.
Great.